And this one is a competitive game where each player has crash landed on the surface of Venus, and players are going to be rolling dice to try and locate survivors, explore and gather materials, and try to power their ship to get launched back off the planet's surface. This game is also my own personal pick of the week, and I do have a few reasons for that, with the first one being that this one does feature a lot of simultaneous play, which is going to allow you to always be taking actions and just make the game move along that much quicker. Secondly, this game features a sort of dice worker placement mechanism, which is always a mechanism that I really do like, and I think this game does it particularly well with the amount of options that it gives you, because you'll be rolling those dice to try to create different sets, and depending on the sets that you get, you'll be able to place those dice on your own personal player board in order to unlock access to different actions or resources. But because you can often make multiple sets with the dice that you roll, or you might even unlock different powers that allow you to re-roll or manipulate your dice, which is just going to give you a whole bunch of flexibility with your dice since you're combining them together in order to take your actions, which is a lot different from a lot of other dice worker placement games where usually you're placing the dice individually, which is almost always a lot more limiting. But this game plays over a series of rounds where each player is going to be simultaneously rolling their dice and then creating sets with those dice in order to take those actions, and the different actions can allow you to gain different polyominoes of different sizes that you'll be able to place out on your various boards, or they can gain you resources which can be common resources which you can spend to bump up or down a pip on any of your dice, or there's rarer ones that can actually be spent to grant you temporary dice. There's also actions that can grant you some one-time use ability cards, and then there is the most difficult action to unlock, which is to get 5 dice of the same value, which will grant you fuel for your ship, and the first player that's able to get 5 of these is going to be triggering the final round of the game. All the different combinations of dice and their associated actions are all outlined on each of the players' player boards, and some of these combinations are easier to get than others. For example, this top left location only requires 3 dice. It doesn't matter what their values are, you're just going to have to sacrifice those 3 dice to take that action. And there is also a location here that just requires 1 of any die, which is really nice if you do have a die left over. Some of the more difficult locations might require you to get sequential runs of dice or dice of the same value, but what's really nice about these is that you can get a different action unlocked depending on how many dice you can create in that set. So for example, if you're able to get 3 dice of the same value, that's going to be getting you a different action than if you're able to get 4 or 5 dice of the same value. There is also a location if you're able to get a full house, so that would mean 3 dice of the same value and 2 dice of a different value. And then there are also these other locations where you can actually sacrifice dice in order to modify the pip of another die. So you can already see how there's a ton of different ways that you can spend your dice, but you're only going to have more options as you get more of those one-time use cards or those different resources that allow you to manipulate your dice even more. But there are also some permanent abilities that you can get, so you can actually build up a bit of an engine. And the way that you get these is by placing out those polyomino tiles, because any location that you cover up, you're going to be gaining the resource at that location, and some of those locations have survivors from your ship, and you'll be able to take that survivor and then gain a engineer card, which you're going to be putting onto your board and then assigning that survivor to that card in order to indicate that it's activated. These cards give you abilities that you can use once per turn. Another thing to note about these different tiles that you're going to be covering up with polyominoes is that all players do start with one of them at the beginning of the game, and if you're able to completely fill up a tile, that is another way that you can get fuel for your ship. But if you decide to place a polyomino that goes off any edge of the tile, that will allow you to add a new tile to that board, extending the different options that you have and also granting you with new opportunities. This gives players options if they want to prioritize saving more of those engineers, or if they want to try and go for more of those fuel rods. As I mentioned, those fuel rods are really important because the first player to get 5 of them at the top of their board is going to be triggering the final round in the game. And what's really cool about this part of the game is that the rest of the game played simultaneously, but the final round plays with players going one at a time. Whichever player's turn it is, they're going to be rolling their dice, but then also adding a bonus die equal to the number of fuel rods that they were able to acquire at this point in the game. What you're trying to do at this point is roll the most dice of the same value, because it's whichever player that's able to do that does win the game, and if there's a tie, it's the player that rolls the highest value that's going to win. And I really do like how this works and how it's very different from other games, and it's not about victory points or anything like that to win the game. And just because you're the player that triggered the end of the game, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll win, because there is an element of chance here. But if you did trigger the end, and if you do have those 5 extra bonus dice added to your pool, you do have much better odds. But it's not all about the dice, because it's also about all the different special actions and abilities that you're able to acquire and unlock throughout the game that are also going to help you with this final round. Since all the players are doing this at one at a time at the end of the game, this also creates a nice little spectacle where everyone's very interested in what the other players are doing, and it'll definitely be creating some tension as players are trying to outdo the rules of the other players, even if they don't have quite as much to work with. I think this one looks like a lot of fun, and if you do too, you can go ahead and check it out down below. And don't forget that you can click that notify me on launch button in order to get notified once this one launches.